When I found out that I'd be coming to Cambodia, I was so excited. And the very first thing I thought about is, how can I learn the language? I was in Sri Lanka at the time with my partner, and we both wanted to get an introduction to the Khmer language and culture. We asked around. Turns out it's actually quite hard to find a Khmer teacher. But there was a monk studying at a temple nearby, and he was from Cambodia. So we asked him to teach us, and he agreed. He had no books, he had no clue how to teach a language, but he was friendly, he was funny, he was curious, all the right qualities for learning and teaching. He came to our house and sat at the head of a long dining table with his orange robe spilling all around him. It was a beautiful sight. And he laughed as we struggled with the alphabet, trying to get our mouth around these sounds, and we invented lessons on the spot. It got complicated and funny rather quickly. As many of you know, in the Khmer language, there are certain words that monks use for everyday things. So eating or drinking, or I or you. So having a simple conversation about dinner got very complicated. He couldn't eat after 1 p.m. at the temple. So he didn't see the point of having a practiced dialogue about having dinner at a restaurant. And no matter what we did, we could not convince him not to be himself for that moment. Needless to say, we didn't learn very much in those lessons, but that really wasn't the point. Fortunately, I had already found an iPad app to teach the alphabet. I had found online videos and resources. Just spending time with him was a fantastic window into his culture and his life and his language. And that's what made the difference. And it was an excellent preparation for coming to Cambodia. Now, I love languages. I've been studying them since I was a kid. It's what I studied at university, and it's how I found my career. It's also how I met my partner, and it's the way that I've traveled around the world and had the chance to work and study and explore upwards of 65 countries, with Cambodia being my 65th. So I now work with an organization called EF, Education First, and we teach languages around the world to people from all ages. And so having so many people, we've had millions go through our programs, it gives us a fantastic perspective on learning and teaching, what's actually happening. And we get to watch people grow in real time. And this is what I love about languages. The process actually changes you. Learning a language will change your life. It will give you a better mind. It will stretch your understanding of the world, and your opportunities in life increase. When a baby is born, it's equipped to learn any one of the 7,000 languages in the world. It can learn to make the sounds and distinguish the grammar and the rules, and if it's exposed to more than one language, it'll be able to tell them apart very simply. And research studies on bilingualism in young children shows, time and time again, that having languages also has other practical benefits. People who have languages also have a better memory. They pay attention better. They read better. They write better. They understand their own language better. They think better. They grow older better and age better. They do better in school. And crucially, they develop better attitudes about others. These are real practical benefits. And the sooner you start, the better. Now, a person can learn a language at any age, but how they go about it, kids and adults, is different. And that also comes into how we teach them. Kids are fearless. They can quickly master a language simply in order to play and make friends. They can quickly absorb the rules, make the sounds, and tell things apart on their own. They have a fantastic curiosity and creative ability with language. So as parents and educators, what's most important at an early age is to make sure that we develop that curiosity. We develop that creativity, because that positive attitude will last them for a lifetime. Now, adults are more complicated. They have maturity. They can sit still for longer. That helps. But they may have lost touch with that natural creative instinct and play with language. They also will have academic or professional or home reasons for learning a language, and that can add additional pressure. So what we have to be thinking about when we teach the languages is how to connect the adults' knowledge of themselves, to raise their self-awareness of what progress they're actually making and how it connects to the real world. And then we also have to work to find that creativity again, to help them take risks and become more confident. And it's a fascinating process to watch. as people come out of their shells and they become someone new. I'm an unlikely person to be talking about this today, based on where I come from. It would seem impossible from my childhood perspective. I grew up in Texas. I was born in Texas in the south of the United States at the end of the 1960s. And from the 60s and on into the 70s, the United States was not a very optimistic place internationally. We were locked in a Cold War with the Soviet Union. We were struggling to understand our involvement and cope with our involvement here in the region, in Vietnam and in Cambodia. We were told to be worried about what communism might do to us. And closer to home, in Texas along the border with Mexico and across the south of the United States, racial and ethnic tension was real. It was in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our classrooms. But fortunately, I had several experiences as a child, both with languages and with meeting people from other places, that helped to challenge all that and helped me to see another side of the story. The Texas of my childhood was not necessarily always the most open-minded place. But ironically, there's an incredible amount of diversity there, through a history of immigration over the centuries and due to more recent geopolitical events. In my primary school, there were young, brave Vietnamese and Cambodian children who arrived, not speaking a word of English, and quietly integrating and thriving the next. They called them boat people, which we didn't really understand because we were in the middle of Texas, not near any water. We also had real, live Russians who had defected from the Soviet Union and moved into the neighborhood. And one Russian family set up a small gymnastics training school because they were professional gymnasts in the Soviet Union. So I joined and regularly made a fool of myself every week there. But luckily, one day, the Cold War came to Texas. And in 1979, my hometown, Fort Worth, Texas, hosted the World Cup Gymnastics Championships. And the Russian coach took us. Now, I was 10 years old at the time. And we were going to be seeing the fearsome Soviets and Romanian gymnasts, the ones who were famous for never smiling. So we were really excited, but also a little bit scared. However, we went to the practice rounds. They let us in to come and watch them train. And we saw them. And they were teenagers on an adventure abroad. And it made a huge impact on us because we saw them laughing, playing. We got to meet them. We even got to train with some of the gymnasts in the competition. So it turned everything upside down from what we had been told and what to expect. Also, we had exchange students arriving by the dozens in our city and our schools. We hosted a Chinese musician in our house who sang all day long. And then we had a Swedish exchange student as well. All of these international experiences acted like passport stamps on my young brain. And it made me want to explore more and collect more of them. I wanted to get out in the world and find out for myself. Eventually, I did learn Russian, and I traveled across the Soviet Union and in modern Russia today. I learned Spanish, and I lived in Mexico, and I taught there. I had a fantastic opportunity to move to China while China was opening up in the early 2000s, and I lived in Shanghai for 3 years. And many, many opportunities apart from that, and I'm here with you today. Now, fortunately, my parents saw the world a little bit differently. They encouraged me and my brother to read a lot and to use our imaginations. They are educators in the arts, and they gave us our first exposure to languages and culture through music, through theater, through books. Every week we went to the public library, and we devoured stacks of books in between visits. And along the way, I discovered that you could check out cassette tapes, if you remember those, or records, going way back, where you could teach yourself another language. And it must have been a very funny sight for the local librarian to see a young boy, 8 years old, at the counter with a stack of mystery books in one hand and beginner Japanese in the other. But I was hooked. It was almost magical listening to people make these sounds from all around the planet. And I began to understand that there were rules and that there were patterns. They were doing things like we did in English. I wanted to figure out that puzzle. But more importantly, I wanted to meet these people. I wanted to know who they were. Now, this was all very low-tech. This media wasn't the problem, though. It was the method. What was missing was a window into the culture of these people. I couldn't see them. I couldn't see what was important to them. And understanding how different cultures behave and what's important to them is a very powerful experience in learning. It teaches you what's important to you. You learn a lot about yourself in the process. but you also learn about the values and the beliefs and attitudes of another culture. So when we teach languages today, we do focus on that. We focus on what is important in that culture. We teach the building blocks of language, but we also look at what do people find important? What do they fear? What do they believe in? Who is important and why? The taboos, what happens at home and in the office. And this allows people to get a window that's bigger than the language. They get a perspective on the culture. And this will crucially help them if they're going to work and travel internationally. It will help them be successful. So when we teach, we want to give people a window onto cultures, and we want to allow them to be able to see where they can take themselves in life as well. Knowing other cultures and knowing other languages does bring opportunities. It opens doors. And 2012 is a very important year. For the first time, there's a big economic shift happening. Developing countries will import more this year than developed countries. Also, their output is growing faster while the developed countries have stopped. This means that more people in the world today are trading in more places than ever before, and they need to be able to communicate. And company executives that have been recently surveyed said that the lack of language and culture skills in their organizations was holding them back. They can't grow. They've also said that in recruitment, it's going to be essential to hire someone who speaks at least one additional language. So certainly countries and companies recognize that they need language speakers of all kinds. But which language should you learn? Knowing just one of the United Nations world languages, French, Russian, Arabic, Spanish, English, and Mandarin, will give you access to hundreds of millions of people on the planet. Over 2/3 of the world's population speaks just one of those languages. And in the case of English, over the next decade, over 2 billion people will be speaking the language, and most of them are not native speakers, under a quarter. So English has become the dominant language for research, for trade, international cooperation. And that may not be the case for the long term, but it certainly is undeniably important right now. And at EF, we did some research on this. We gave a free English test to over 2 million people around the world. And we looked at the results. We grouped the results by country. Which countries spoke the best English? And then we took that ranking and compared it to those countries' economic development. And the results were clear and convincing. In every case, the higher the level of English in the country correlated strongly with higher trade, higher education attainment, and higher income. And the countries that did this best were those that promoted a culture of multilingualism and diversity. They invested in more years of schooling per child. And, crucially, they started language learning early. They've realized that they can't afford not to. Now, the world needs language speakers. The need is more urgent than ever before. But the traditional methods that we see around the world are still aggravating the problem. Uneven teacher training, a lack of quality resources, a lack of a clear vision on a national level in terms of policy, and a simple traditional approach to teaching. They aggravate the problem. They're holding people back. The good news is that language learning is actually better and faster than ever before. We know much more about how people learn and what they need to do it. With new digital and online and mobile technologies, we're able to unleash the creativity of teachers and students to allow them to make progress faster. And we can bring the world into the classroom, allowing students to speak and work with material that really matters to them. With a simple click, students can connect online and work virtually with teachers or on their own with personal adaptive systems. We can also bring media to them directly so that they can actually connect and have that cultural contact right from where they're working. If they're learning Mandarin, they can see people in Shanghai exploring a market. They can look at local menus from a restaurant in London, watch the live local news in New York, or play games with new friends in Moscow. This cultural contact is real and it's powerful, but you don't have to leave home to get it. And so it makes it far more accessible for more people. We're also completely changing what we do in the classroom. By introducing mobile technologies, we can untether students from the computers, and they can turn in and face each other and collaborate. And this makes the experience far more social we're also able to change what we teach to focus on the tasks that people will do in the real world. And these kinds of simulations give students a taste of what to expect when using the language, and also a vision of who they can become. Languages will help you realize your potential. Indeed, they'll give you a better brain, a more open mind, and a brighter future. The way we teach them today is about promoting creativity and discovery and exploration and collaboration. This helps you become more confident, to learn to take risks and be independent. You get a chance to find your voice in the process, and you get to see who you can become. But one of the best things about learning a language is that it teaches you humility. Trying to be yourself in another language strips your personality down to its most basic elements. Languages are complicated and subtle. They're beautiful systems. Approaching a new one can seem like an impossible task. But it's good to do things that seem impossible. It can change your life. Thank you.